Hello and welcome to this online lesson. My name is Mr. Hoven and today we are going to be looking at the early U.S. involvement in World War II. If you remember from last time, we were discussing the causes of World War II and what led to this breakout of war in Europe. And we looked at the appeasement, so giving in to aggressive countries in order to avoid conflicts. We looked at appeasement and how that led to war. We looked at the rise of dictators like Tojo, Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin. We looked at the main causes, which were similar to World War I: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism, and how they pertain to World War II. And finally, we looked at the Treaty of Versailles and how this treaty treated Germany and why those harsh treatments spurred on Hitler to encourage his people to overthrow this treaty and begin creating an all-German empire. Today, we're looking at how is the U.S. involved when all this is going on? When war breaks out, what do we do? Do we proclaim neutrality or do we get involved? So early on in World War II, America is kind of sitting back, staying out of it. As the war unfolds in Europe, most Americans lean toward the Allies. So we're in favor of Great Britain and France and the USSR. But we did not want war. However, Roosevelt thought it's better to be safe than sorry. He wanted to be ready for the conflict. He urged Congress to strengthen the Navy in 1939. And in 1940, he instituted the Selective Training and Service Act, which was signed for men ages 21 through 35, which in turn was the first peacetime draft in U.S. history. Again, we're not wanting to get into war, but we want to be prepared just in case. And early on, as soon as the war begins, the U.S. signs the Neutrality Act of 1939. When war breaks out in Europe, the U.S., we proclaim neutrality, want to stay out. Roosevelt lobbies Congress to eliminate ban on arms sales to nations at war. So again, we're going to initially try to stop supplying weapons to countries that are in the fighting. However, warring nations could buy weapons from the United States if they paid in cash and carried their arms on their own ships. And this became known as cash and carry. So if you look at the picture, the Neutrality Act again, there's the old man sitting. He represents the United States, Uncle Sam. Neutrality Act, we're staying out. But if countries wanted to pay in cash and carry their own weapons, we'd put the aid that will win on their ships to take back to their countries. So again, we're technically not involved, but this is definitely helping out our economy selling all of these goods. And then the United States developed the Lend-Lease Act of 1941. We realized we could make some money on these countries at war, and it really helped pulling us out of the Great Depression, getting us out of that economic slump that we were in during the 1930s. The U.S. would lend or lease arms to any country considered vital to the defense of the United States and our interests. So again, some of our allies, like Great Britain, would definitely receive aid from the United States because they are going to be protecting our interests throughout the world. In 1941, Roosevelt had the U.S. Navy begin protecting British ships close to the U.S. that may be carrying some of those Lend-Lease items. However, Germany didn't like that. So when German submarines fired on American destroyers, Roosevelt ordered the Navy to shoot on sight any German or Italian vessels in U.S. waters. And by the time Lend-Lease ended, the U.S. had contributed over $40 billion in weapons, vehicles, and other supplies to the Allied war effort. Again, we're not technically involved, but it definitely seems like we have some favorites during the war. And finally, we did begin to get more involved, especially with the signing of the Atlantic Charter. In August 1941, Roosevelt meets with Winston Churchill, who's the leader of Great Britain, aboard warships off Newfoundland. Roosevelt made no military commitments, but he set up a post-war deal with Churchill. The two individuals committed their countries to a post-war world of democracy, non-aggression, free trade, economic advancement, and freedom of the seas. Again, the U.S. still isn't technically involved. However, it seems that we are becoming more and more prevalent in this conflict, and it's almost impossible for us to stay completely out. And because we're supplying the Allies with weapons and goods and aid, the Axis powers were getting upset. This was the perfect recipe for an event that would live on in infamy forever. We'll look at that next time. You all have a great night, and we'll see you next time.